Okay, so as mentioned, if you're using render functions, we don't really need all of that, and we need to implement it ourselves. And the URL handling part is largely the same with last time. Window.location.hash/1, and we'll just copy this and update our app URL whenever things change. And the meaty part here is how to figure out which component to use. So let's write the router table. So we can obviously just do this. Pretty straightforward. So just so that it looks more like a router table, let's make the keys strings. And what we want to do here is we still need a root level div if we want to render those links as well. And inside the div, the first thing we want to return is the component, is essentially the router view that we want to render for the current route. And we have the current URL, and we have the route table. So let's just check if the route table contains a component that's matching what we want here. And if there's nothing there, we can simply fall back to the not found component. So this completes the task of finding the corresponding component out of the route table and falling back to the not found if there's nothing matched. And we also need to have the two A links, I believe. Foo, and copied it with bar. So one thing you may notice if we run this, oops. You notice that there's no space between foo and bar, unlike if you use templates. This is because when you use HTML templates, Vue retains the white space between your elements if there are new lines. This is the same behavior as if you're writing normal HTML. But when you're using render functions, there's no white space node. There's no white space node between the foo and bar. So they're just like close to each other. There's no white space in between. So a lot of people are not used to this when they switch to render functions, and you can either deal with this with CSS, or if you want to, you can just add an empty space in between manually. So this should make it look better. And it switches, and more importantly, let's go to some random URL and it will show not found. So we've implemented some pretty rudimentary routing. If all your app need to do is just switching between top level pages, we've essentially achieved the goal. But in reality, routing is much more complicated than that. Imagine you have URLs like foo123. It's very common to say username, or right? You have all these dynamic segments here. And if you've used a router before, you know that a common convention is to denote a dynamic segment starting with a colon. So a URL pattern like this means we want to match anything that starts with user, and this part can be anything. And also, we want to extract this dynamic segment. Let's pass it to our component as a prop or as some sort of data. The component needs to be able to access and know like the what the current dynamic segment is. And so in reality, this will match something like this, where your component will probably get an object like this, which is the dynamic data that's associated with the current route. And then imagine if you have something like this. Then you probably expect something like path, this, user 123, and then this is considered something like params, and query is foo bar. So essentially, we're translating a raw URL into a JavaScript data structure that's easier for our apps to for our components to consume, right? Instead of having to parse it everywhere. So this is a very common need, and in the next section, we'll talk. In the next exercise, we'll try to deal with some of it. We're not going to construct a full route object like this. What we want to do is really just be able to match dynamic paths like this, and being able to extract the username 123 part and pass it to our component. So what we want is essentially this. Okay. So how do we do this? This involves some advanced parsing, right? You need to somehow write a parser that knows how to parse a URL and figure out these dynamic segments, and then figure out how to match this incoming raw path to this pattern and extract this username. So seems like there could be some way you can probably handwrite a regular expression to do that, but we want this whole process to be automatic. So we need something to convert these patterns into regular expressions that can help us do the parsing at runtime. And luckily, you don't have to write that yourself. There is an existing library that does a pretty good job at this, and that library is called path2exp, or path2regexp. So if you look it up on Google, path2regexp, this is where it shows up. So it's a very pretty popular package. It's used in quite a few router implementations. And the API, though, is not super straightforward. Well, it's actually pretty straightforward. So the API looks like this. You need, so obviously it exposes a function called path2regexp, and you need to pass your pattern as the first argument into it. The weird thing is you need to also pass in a key array, a keys array. So this array will be used to fill in the dynamic segments if there are any. So see there is a dynamic segment bar. After we get the regexp, we also have this keys array filled up with an object, and this object has a name bar, prefix / delimiter / optional, blah blah blah. So most of these you don't really need to worry about. The information that we need is that there is one dynamic segment and its name is bar. Okay, and this will correspond to when you execute this regular expression on an incoming raw path. If you've worked with JavaScript regular expression before, you know if it matches, it'll return an array. And this array will contain, if you have capture groups inside your regular expression, this array will, in addition to the whole matching string as the first element in the array, it will be followed by all these capture groups. That's the strings that's matched by these capture groups. So those capture groups will correspond to this keys array. So if you execute this on a matching path, you will get an array which first element is the full path, and second element will be the content that matches the bar segment. So this might be a bit abstract to talk about, so we'll go into the code to just quickly show you how the thing works. So let's say const keys equals this. So if you use latest repository, we already linked path to regexp onto the page so you can access directly. So path to regexp foo bar keys and okay. And let's make this, so you can either do this, foo 1, 2, 3. Okay. So if we do this now, and it matches, result will be an array that looks something like this. It will be foo 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like this. I probably should just highlight it. Okay, and the keys will look like something like this. Name bar. We'll ignore all the fields that we don't care about. So keys is this, and the result is this. So what you want to do is to slice off the result. Just remove the first element. And now we can use these two arrays to construct a params object into this. So in order to eventually obtain this object, in order to feed it to our components, this is what we need to do. We need to take the raw matching result and the keys and somehow iterate over them and eventually construct the object like this. Okay, so I hope this is enough information on how things work with this. And our goal in this exercise, so if you're still, I'll probably leave it here. And so our goal with this exercise, so we still have foo bar and not found. The difference is we want foo to have a dynamic segment. Right? So if we visit a hash with like /foo /123, our foo component here takes an ID prop. It takes a prop, it expects an ID prop, and it will render that ID out. So, which means if we're at foo 1, 2, 3, this ID will be 1, 2, 3 here. Okay. And we still have the route table, the raw route table, that is. So this raw route table essentially should look like this. Foo ID foo. So this route table is exposed to users. This is essentially our public API. And I should probably just list this as part of the you should not be implementing this. It's required to look like this. Okay. So our goal is we have an app here, and we've already done most of the basic work for you. So what you need to do, so the render function is largely filled out for you. We get the path, and we have two things we need. The first is to determine which component to render. The second is to determine what props to pass to this component. And our render functions are also already written for you. So it's rendering the component to render and passing it the corresponding props. And we have a few links as well. So your job is to implement this part to figure out which component to render and figure out what props to pass to that component. And with this route table configuration. Okay? So yeah, let's get started. So this one probably will take a while. Let's give it 15 minutes. So if you want to see the API for the path to regular expression package, just look it up on GitHub. The name is path to regexp. And it's already linked in the exercise. So you also have some usage in the comments here. Okay, I think if people want to leave, they can probably pack during this.